Welcome, everybody, to our training call for the Sacred Self-Healing Community, Self-Mastery Principles and Exercises. And this is part of the Karmic Manifestation series this year, showing us the essence of what it is that we need to focus on to more consciously manifest. You guys all know me. My name is Jona Bryndis, and I want to start out here while people are still logging on by reviewing the things that we have already learned. If you haven't watched part 1 to 5, then do so. We had very interesting discussions about karma and conditioning, how our true heart's desire can collide with our drive that comes from our ego self, how our inner alignment and congruence needs to be discerned, what these barriers and boundaries of manifestation are. And of course, how we can make more conscious choices in life. Last month, we've talked about soul connection and the aspects that are in the way of making conscious choices, namely the nature of our inner darkness. And we learned some very, very interesting things. Please review these workshops. Today, we want to focus on the ability to harness your life force. And I want to immediately jump to you here, since this is a workshop. You guys are used to me, lecturing more or less, which is okay, but I would like to know from you guys what it is that you understand as self-mastery. And later we're going to talk about the issues that are in the way, and then we get to the principles first and then later to the exercises. So what do you understand as self-mastery? And you see here the levels of self-awareness on your screen. This is something that you are used to by now. Yeah, this is seen from the perspective or through the lens of the self-awareness, like the level of self and which realms are affected by it. So there's the simple view. This is the density level that you guys are all familiar with: the physical, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, and the energetic. But here it is more the ways these things in our life manifest, and self-mastery is obviously the ability to harness all of that. So in other words, to more consciously do this. So how does this compute with you? How do you measure your own levels of self-mastery? Who would like to share? And beware of the idealizations of that. This is about us really sharing how we do this. Yeah, how do we measure whether we are, say, in control? Not how we would like to be in control or what we would ideally have. This brings up our critical inner voice, and all the shoulds and musts and haves. How do you measure your level of self-mastery, guys? That's not correct, Linda. Of course you are on self-mastery level. Everybody is. Yeah, so we are all the masters of our life. So how we measure it, this is something that happens in all of us. Yeah, we all measure our level of self-mastery. I mean, there are some very simple things, obviously. We have some kind of benchmarks in our life, yeah, happiness or amount of money or whatever. Yeah, and that's how we measure us. We all do this all the time. Yes. I don't know a master of self-mastery, to be honest. Yeah, Cindy is replying, trusting in my perception or knowing when to shift and where to go. I love that. This expresses neutrality. You're not really looking at it from the standpoint of an ideal or perfection or lack thereof. You are seeing this, or this is at least what I feel, what is expressed. Yeah, what's the essence of what you just wrote here, is that you see this as a work in progress. Thank you, Cindy.
Hi, Jona. It's Julian.
Hi. Hi, Julian.
I'm just running in the door here. I was just going to say myself, it's that when I know that I can get into a state of neutrality, like when I'm not being, if I can become triggered and then we get into an emotional state, and then I can bring it back to balance by being consciously aware that I'm in an emotional state, or that I'm getting pulled, or also to know that my mind is telling me something and I can just go, hang on a minute, and bring myself back to center and feel out where that's coming from, so that I am in that neutral state where I'm not reactive, more so like being able to observe what's going on, admit to myself where I'm going, and then come back into that neutral balanced state to then move forward from that state rather than in that unconscious state.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in this, Julian. Thank you for sharing. It was basically the advanced version of what Cindy mentioned, right? So there's a discernment piece here. Yeah, for you, self-mastery is expressed in the ability to discern where things are coming from, and knowing what's yours, what isn't, and even if it's within your own mind, if it's coming from a place of ego or anxiousness or something like that. And then to know how to shift, that was the part that Cindy mentioned, but also how to balance. So the goal, what I heard you say, Julian, is that you measure your level of self-mastery through the ability of balancing yourself when you feel something like an imbalance. Yeah, that's the discernment part. And the last part here was that you know that you are balanced when you're not reactive. Yeah, you mentioned neutrality. I like that.
And knowing when to clear as well.
Yeah.
Like it actually just like, whoa, what state? Just, I mean, and you've taught us that all throughout, is like, what state, where is my energy at now? Where's my focus? And being able to understand, like take a step back and look actually what is, observe what's going on, and then knowing to clear, because sometimes you just have to clear.
Yeah, it's like brushing your teeth or cleaning your kitchen counter, I mean,
Yeah.
it's part of the problem.
Absolutely.
So that's very cool. The question now is, what's the drive here? I mean, why do we want balance, neutrality, the ability to shift our energy, or knowing when to clear ourselves? Why? What's our motivation? Why do we want self-mastery?
It's living in a conscious state where we know that most other times we've been living in unconscious, reactive, programmed states, and we can recognize when we become conscious how unconscious we can become.
What happens when we're unconscious? I mean, let's be practical here. Yeah, what's the problem with being unconscious?
Yeah, well, we are creating more, we're getting sort of like enmeshed in other people's stories and even our own stories of delusion, I suppose, you know, and sometimes, like, even when I recognize I've been in a low state, and then the next day I go, wow, I can't believe I did that or I said that.
So it creates a split in
Which,
us, or it creates a contradiction in us, right? I mean,
that's right.
whatever we call this, right? There's some kind of conflict then in us. Like when we say these things like, oh, why did I do this? Or why did I choose this? Or why, how come I let this happen? Or something like that, right? I mean, in psychology, they call it a split that occurs. Yeah. So we have like two debating parties in our head.
Yeah, and understanding, being able to practice, we've practiced doing that for so long that I can recognize when it, like, to be able to catch it, or even if I don't catch it in the moment, it's a bit, you know, it might be the next day or 2 hours later, and then it's like, then it's up to me to actually look at it, because I know that's that schism within me, that it's that, it's like, wow, that came forward, and it came forward really quickly, like being the unconscious program driving me or pulling me into that state of, like, it's like unconsciousness. You
Yeah,
just react.
the schism that you mentioned here, Becky is adding, yes, like a conflict of mindsets, beliefs, values, and such. Yeah, this is the split. Okay, the problem with that is, yeah, when we just think of our own experiences in the past, yeah, that we can see that some of our trauma, some of our really negative experiences, you know, the ones that we consciously decided or not. Yeah, so you know, karma is something that you know, that we all have to go through for a certain number of years. Yeah, even if we're conscious, even if you're
Even to understand it, even to
yeah.
be able to observe it. It's like, oh wow, and it's like waking up from a program.
Yes, being able to understand or intellectually see or recognize a pattern is obviously the first step. But then, you know, to learn how one can correct this or adjust this or, you know, like balance it out or whatever the problem is, okay, that we've identified, that takes a while. Guys, I remember this. There is a certain number of years, literally. There's life experiences, life wisdom that we need to build in order to be able to do this. It is not possible to know, you know, what a toxic relationship is when you are, you know, 18 years old. It's not possible. I mean, even if you've observed it with other people. And let's just say it's even harder to know how to avoid it or how to correct it. Yeah. So there's typically, in my observation, and I mentioned this in different contexts, you know, sort of these life cycles that we go through. And it isn't until the end of our 20s that we begin really to step into our conscious self. Yeah, there may be some levels of consciousness and even some levels of perception that are working for us, that are, you know, developing for us. But it isn't really until this time, and this is why, you know, sort of true adulthood, yeah, not the legal age, but the true adulthood, used to be considered 28. Yeah, that's sort of a time in our life when we step into higher levels of maturity and wisdom. Yeah, sort of a more conscious will. And you know, that still can happen in different ways for people. Yeah, so this doesn't mean that everybody is wise at the age of 28, and it doesn't mean that, you know, we can't have that wisdom if we're 24. Okay, so this is, as you guys all know, big part of what I'm doing here in 3D. Yeah, namely to actually see what happens if you if you program kids in this way that we are learning it here from the get-go. Yeah, because then there will be certain things that they won't have to, I don't want to say they don't have to go through it, but they won't have as many illusions about things. Yeah, it will be much more, they have a much higher capacity to discern truth, to express their own feelings and so forth. So we're going to look into this here very quick. So Julian, and what you just said, and this is a slide that is just slightly improved here from our last workshop about the nature of darkness. Yeah, if you look on the left here, you know, these are the problems that can arise, you know, when we are unconscious. Not only are we unaware and therefore often believe in illusions, we can also, you know, have, you know, delusions about what reality is, and idealizations and so forth. Yeah, lots of projections. We can be victim or, you know, actually perpetrator of mind control. Yeah, manipulation. We can, you know, be in a place where we just see our life sort of zooming by without having an idea of what we are, who we are, and what we want to be. Or we can fall for, you know, false faith, or faith that is, you know, when I say faith, I mean, you know, the belief that we have, yeah, that can literally send us to the wrong exit. Yeah, so we talked about this last time, and here on the right side you see some of the visionary and the perceptionary issues that can arise with these specific barriers of perception and manifestation. So you guys all figured this out. It's about the balance. Yeah, it's about bringing all this, harmonizing all this, bringing this all in balance. At that moment, we are, or we're beginning to speak of self-mastery. Yeah, it is not about having either of them in an ideal state. It is about bringing them into balance so that we have, let's say, that we can decrease or minimize inner conflicts. Yeah, because we found out that inner conflicts lead to what? What do inner conflicts lead to in general? Do they enliven you? Do they empower you? Do they give you life force? Do they make you happy? Yeah, Sheila, you're saying restrictions. Okay, what does this mean? Can you guys form full sentences? What does it do to us if we are not able to self-master? Or, you know, like, it's a realm, obviously. It's not one state. It's the balance here. Yes, it tanks our energy. Exactly, Cindy. It's, yes, it makes us do bad choices, or inappropriate, as you called it, or you know, just simply wastes our energy away, either for the wrong things, or, you know, through not even stepping into our energy in the first place. Yeah, so now we get it. Now we understand why we even want self-mastery. Yeah, and Janet, you nailed it. Of course, it literally prevents growth. Yeah, it doesn't actually matter if it's faster, vibratory. I mean, growth is always faster relative to the state that we were in before. And that's also how we define healing. Yeah, healing is raising our vibration from a lower into a higher state relative. Okay, yeah, you guys know this. So when we're in anxiety, then connecting with our anger, which is a higher vibrational state, even though we have sort of negative feelings about that, but it still is a higher vibratory state, and therefore we experience healing. The issue that we have is that we haven't really learned how to manage the expressions of these emotional states that, you know, or you know, sort of connected with negative feelings. So in essence, self-mastery is something that helps us on many, many different levels, not just, on this sort of woo, like, oh, conscious manifestation and being in the flow and effortless love and beauty and freedom. No, it's very, very practical. It has to do with us being able to actually understand what's going on, yeah, where our energy goes. In the last energy update, what was that, 23 or 24, I suggested once more to look at our energy like money. Why would we want to waste our energy on stuff that creates conflicts, that creates stress, that creates restrictions, that does not allow for growth? Yeah, that is painful. Why would we do that? Would you spend money on something that produces pain for you? Well, not consciously, but in essence, we all spend a lot of money on stuff that is painful for us, not realizing it. Yeah, not realizing it. So there are some of these principles of conscious self living that I want to go through one more time, because this has to do with something I mentioned here in this particular energy update as well, namely really understanding that there are certain things that everybody can do, Linda, regardless of how you judge your level of self-mastery. Yeah, I'm emphasizing these words for a reason. Yeah, it's all relative. And there are certain things that are not actually hard, as sort of these I don't know. I mean, if you would contextualize this in a religious way, you talk about commandments. If you talk about it in a philosophical way, you would talk about principles. If you talk about it in a psychological way, you would talk about needs and wants. Okay, so regardless through which lens you look at it, we need a roadmap to navigate all these temptations, all these confusions, all these illusions, all these, inner outer deceptions. We need that. This is part of our human condition. It's what we need to contend with. Yeah. We have a 3D body that is mortal. We have an ego that is designed to help us survive our life. And we have a consciousness that clearly has to deal with the confliction that arises out of the awareness. Even, people never really heard about, self-mastery, self-healing, anything like that. Have an awareness that there's something more in them, something like a soul. Yeah. So we have to live with this duality, that we can experience ourselves in a, spiritual, energetic way, but at the same time also as a physical being that clearly has an expiration date on it, so that doesn't actually that deteriorates over time. So this is what our ego has to deal with, and this is the reason why we have an ego, and that's why the ego is important, because it deals with all these conflictions of identity and decision making and all that. We have to have an instance in us, yeah, that deals with the fundamental dualities of life. But the problem is the ego is that if we identify with the ego, if we believe that that is who we truly are, then we run into limits. We run into limitations and boundaries, because ego isn't really there to make us happy. So ego will make this, make suggestions such as, make as much money as you can so that you feel safe and secure, or it will suggest to have as many kids as you can, yeah, so that you have somebody to take care of you when you need something, and so forth. You can you can interpolate. There's a sort of component of idealization and greed and so forth in ego, because it wants to have and to gain and to obtain things through control. The soul self level that we all have, no more or less, depends on how much attention we give this, speaks in a different way. It's the one that guides us toward purpose and meaning and fulfillment, the more intangible goals in life, and they cannot be obtained through getting, having, owning. And this is then fundamentally the problem that we all have to deal with. So when you look at the principles of conscious self-living, okay, you see a bunch of things here, and obviously my infographics always, they work on many different levels, so that they, look at things from multiple perspectives at the same time. But really what you see here is things that we can all focus on. Focus on connection, for example. Yeah, and don't get this confused now with some of the other charts, because this isn't necessarily limited to the body level, but it has something to do with getting our physical life force into action. Yeah, and I put vitamin love here, as a representation of self-love, because self-love and self-care are, after all, even from an ego perspective, things that we all have to deal with. Yeah, and when we become lazy, or when we allow ourselves to become stale, to just like sort of, not really work on physical wellness, okay, then it is really, really difficult for us to overcome all these challenges in this world, even on a simple level. So it also refers to staying in conscious connection with oneself, obviously, and others. So when we isolate, you'll see your neurotransmitters and your physical functions go down. And that's very clear, besides your emotions and your etheric and all that contracting. But you know what I mean, like, this is a fundamental principle, to focus on connection, internal and external. We need that for survival. It's a very fundamental need. Then secondly, to honor our life force, and this is also where emotions and stuff comes in, where there's clarity needed, where we need to kind of, gather experiences, go through situations, study, improve our understanding of self and our emotions, and consciously manage our energy. This refers to something, Julian, you said, like the reactivity. So it's still somewhat physical in a way, but it's where, our emotions and our drive and all these things begin to mix. So to honor our life force is a really, really important understanding, or expresses an important understanding, that there is something like, the kind of life force that you can see in plants, that make plants grow. That is important for us to grow. And then comes a principle number 3, never compromise truth. That is often not so easy for us, because we don't have the levels of discernment needed. This is where the sacred self-healing comes in, because this needs to be practiced. This isn't a matter of just understanding it. So here we have to learn the limitations of our ego mind, and that we can't really identify with them. We can't identify with our critical inner voice. We can't identify with our false self. These are things that have developed as ego defense mechanisms for a reason. So they helped us to get through some of the, the difficult times of individuation and so forth. But it's not really always true for us. Yeah, so just think of, the typical example where, your parents have a family business or whatever. It's a third generation, and they've always been, I don't know, shop owners or cops or doctors, and it is expected from you to, you know, do the same thing. And the discernment is needed here for really identifying our true identity with this. Namely, is this actually something that I truly want, and not, the just a program like you called it, or a conditioning. Then principle number 4 is something that is a bit more or less tangible, if you will, to be interested and to actually care. Yeah, this is a higher level of connection. To be interested in the world, to be interested in other people. This has to do with empathy. Also with empathy and compassion for ourselves. Compassion means to be with our own pains, with our own sorrows, with our own fears. So, something that energetically sensitives often do once they realize that there isn't much truth out there in the world. Yeah. So once you start, becoming more aware here and developing more discernment, you start disconnecting from the world. Yeah. You say, oh, I don't watch news, and I don't read the paper, and I don't do social media. Well, I have news for you. Yes, I would definitely recommend to monitor this and to make sure that you don't get pulled into your reactivity, which requires a certain level of self-mastery. But if you disconnect from the world, if you disconnect from the issues that are going on in our societies, what concerns people, yeah, world affairs, and it's the same as saying I'm not interested in my neighbors. I don't care about what happens in my tribe or in my whatever your community is. The reason or why this is connected with higher thinking is that, yes, if you are in your lower thinking, yeah, then you will get pulled into it, Julian, like you said. Then you cannot withstand that, or maybe there is a time that we all need to sober ourselves a bit from getting too much pulled into other people's affairs. But the reason why we want to learn discernment is so that we can connect more and deeper, right? You all want deeper connection. Deeper connection also means to be connected with world affairs. I'm not talking politics or war or anything like this. I'm talking about the development of humanity. This is very important to see the bigger picture. Yeah, what is going on here? Remember when we all went through COVID? Let's talk about this for a moment. Without any interest, and I'm not talking about conspiracy theories, but without any interest in the global situation, it was pretty hard to contextualize what was going on there, right? And you can see this in the number of people who are still suffering from the disconnect. Many of you, followed the forum posts, followed the education that I posted there, the webinars, and the talking about something big that is obviously affecting everybody let's say, in the Western world here on this planet. We never had anything like that before. You don't think it's worth paying attention to that and caring about what is going on here for everybody, including yourself, of course? Is there anybody here who completely disconnected from the whole COVID thing from the beginning and never really felt like there was anything going on? I'm just interested. I think it was impossible to completely disconnect. You could, of course, deflect it and go into a state of denial. But I don't think there's any country, not even Sweden, where you wouldn't have noticed a shift in people, different behavior, different actions, different rules and regulations. I mean, in some of your countries, like all the way to like militant and totalitarian changes all of a sudden.
Jona,
Yes.
this is Janet. I was just briefly, I felt quite separate from it where I was at the time. And of course, things started to move in and it all got weird too. But I thankfully hadn't gone through some of the things I was witnessing on the news or, well, with whatever news I watched, whatever few tidbits that I did get from the outside world. I was very thankful not to be
Okay, so
somewhere
you did
more
care.
controlling.
Yeah, so you did care. You were thankful
Yeah,
that
it
you
was,
did
it was,
not.
you know what I noticed when it all first happened, because I did have quite a bit of distance, I have to say, to the emotionality of it was, I was like, oh, good, everybody's going to start to learn their lessons. They're going to learn not to pollute so much. You know, the cars stop to pollute. We're going to learn, we're going to be able to function. And of course, that didn't happen. And the opposite quite happened. That it'll be with me till I die, that thought and that laying there when things started happening and watching everything else unfold. So yes, I cared and was able to at the same time observe enough, I guess, because it entangled me a certain amount, but not
Not to the point that you had panic attacks or didn't dare to go to leave your home or anything like that.
precisely.
So what I hear you say, Janet, is that even though you may have felt, because as energetically sensitives, we all feel a little bit of need to protect ourselves, yeah, which is healthy. Yeah, that is part of our discernment. Yeah, you were able to go into the witnesser mode, yeah, the witnesser of it all, and also realize how you didn't get pulled into your reactivity, so you could stay in higher levels of self-mastery throughout. But there was a level that ultimately all affected us, and that had to do with for example, the freedom, yeah, the ability to travel, yeah, the restrictions that we all experienced there, the ability to even go to places that we would perhaps normally have gone. We couldn't do Iceland for 2 years in a row. Yeah, and there was a lot of things that we could tell with other people. I want to say something about what you said, like, because bigger picture, like what it did to people, but that other people had severe issues. Yeah. So when we can stay in a place of, or on a level of self-mastery here, it is possible for us to observe all this. And the difference between observing and witnessing is that when you observe, you have a certain level of distance or a certain level of dissociation from it. When you witness it, you are experiencing it while you're observing it, and you have your own higher thinking that allows you to contextualize what you're experiencing. Yeah. So Janet, thank you for sharing that, because it was very, very easy, if one, for example, followed the news too much, to get pulled into this, like, oh my God, we're all gonna die, or something like that. So the bigger picture here, and maybe the hopes that we had, that it would lead to people coming to higher levels of self-awareness, higher levels of more consciousness, really, how we treat the world, how we treat people, has not happened yet. Okay, so the problem with our ego is that our ego can only really compare data from a lifetime or a specific time frame. So if you look back now already, you can already tell that, I mean, so in some of our countries, it's just now starting that all the restrictions go away. But then, you know, like in places like here, it's like nobody even remembers COVID. Nobody cares. Yeah, it's gone. It's like completely done. Yeah, but what has it done to people? It has led people to choose a little more carefully how they want to work and where they want to live. We see this in some of these changes in home prices, obviously, but also in like career choices. So there is a tremendous social impact that these last 2 years have had, maybe not in the sense of our ideal, like how we would like it to express, but to see through all this, you have to understand that for a whole entire collective, yeah, consisting of 7 billion people, for higher consciousness to manifest takes hundreds of years. Yeah. I mean, the question comes up over and over again, you know, when will we as a collective finally be, you know, in a place where, you know, say where the overall consciousness level is high enough that we no longer feel as a minority. Yeah. And we don't, or our ego doesn't like the answer, but it'll probably take another 230, 250 years. So the question is not, you know, how fast or when we get this. The question is how, yeah, and what role do we play in this? We were here at this time. We were witnessers of this time, and due to the power of our higher thinking and our caring and our, you know, contextualizing of what all this means, we, and I'm certain of this, have contributed to some people waking up in the sense of like beginning to look a little closer, this confrontation with untruth that I said that's leading to discernment, yeah, to look a little more closely at their relationships and you know, their needs and wants, what truly matters in their life. So for that to manifest even in one person's life, an individual's life, that takes years, decades. Now just think of your own manifestations. Yeah, like how long it takes from the moment that you see something or intellectually understand till you feel it all the way through, till you can fully discern it, till you can make a conscious choice, until that then manifests. Yeah, so this new age idea that you could wave your wand and you know, sort of magically create a new reality, that and you guys know this is a wrong exit. Now, consciousness is not magic. Those are two different things. Magic is an ego notion. No, consciousness is, you know, the long way, the long shot. Okay, by truly shifting the way you see things, you feel things, you sense things, you perceive things, and making choices out of your own individuated insight. We are not being taught this, guys, so we have to learn all this now in our age. Yeah, and so our chances of, let's say, you know, like manifesting this for ourselves and our children and so forth, you know, this we may not experience this in our lifetime. Karmic developments, they happen within 250-year cycles. Okay, 7 generations, which means you know, pulling out one karmic thread right now and resolving that, yeah, ends something that has been going on for 250 years. And yes, you are shifting, you are correcting, you're making an adjustment there to these karmic developments. Yeah, not just for yourself, not just for your, future generations, but for the whole entire collective. But when it comes to measuring that, this is where our ego always gets in our way. Yeah, we need to be okay with it not sort of happening in our lifetime. Yeah, because the ego can only think in lifetime. Yeah, it gets erased after a lifetime. But our soul, the spirit being in us, it regards life in a completely different way. It doesn't think in terms of like, whatever, 70, 80 years. And that's, the part here that sets in with the higher thinking and the higher perceiving, is that we realize that it's not really just about us. Cindy is joking here. She says the other day she saw an ad on Facebook that said, manifest your heart's desire in one day. Yeah. Awesome. That's a really beautiful wish. Yeah, so you guys understand, when it comes to discernment here, you have to go all the way with it. Yeah, and then when you look at principle number 5, be awake. Yeah, but that really means like, okay, from now on, that you have that discernment, that you have that awareness. Oh, you got to stay on it. Yeah, and take initiative. Why take initiative? Because you recognize that there is a bigger perspective. You recognize that there is a bigger picture. You recognize that it is the overcoming of your asleepness that is the most important exercise in being a conscious soul self. You recognize that avoiding anything autopilot or escapism, yeah, is sending you back to your lower levels of awareness. So you realize that what it means to be in spirit, when you're in spirit, in other words, when you are connecting with the spirit being that is in you, that's when you become inspiring. That's when you are inspired. And when you are inspired, what happens then? You take initiative because you understand the bigger ramifications of that. Instead of sitting somewhere and mulling over your victimhood and energizing your powerlessness, which is nothing other than asleepness, autopilot, pilot escapism, and externalization. So in order to energize the conscious self that you are, once you've really felt this and you know this through your own inner experience, you recognize it's no longer about particular results. It's about staying on it. It's about staying awake. Yeah. And working toward the higher goals. And what are those higher goals? Well, you tell me. What are those higher goals? We mentioned a little bit about this here earlier. We don't want to be reactive. We don't want to be this. We don't want to be that. Okay, that's no longer what we want to do, because once you are awake and aware, you understand that if you energize what you don't want, where's your energy going to go? Where's your money going to go? Spell it out, guys. Hear yourself thinking it and having that insight. Where's your energy going to go if you continue operating on a level of what you don't want? Which, yes, granted, it's a higher vibratory level than someone who, believes that they're a victim of life or something like that. But we're like up here, okay? What are you energizing? Yes, Becky, you're energizing what you don't want, but where's your energy going to go?
Well,
It's
isn't it then get dispersed, or like you're sending your energy into a bunch of little black holes, like with every negative thing, like, oh, I don't, that keeps roaring on all your entire life. I don't, and even if it's subconscious, it's like your energy goes into this little black hole and gets sucked up, and it doesn't really widen or something.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you call it little black hole. We all have a sort of a slightly different imagery for that, but fundamentally, it goes into our schisms again. It goes into our so it goes into a confliction again. Okay, it goes backwards. Yeah. So at that point, you're going to have to realize that it's only through initiative and awakeness. Yeah, again, initiative is to actually step into your life force, not just honor it, not just understand it, not just care. No, to actually step into it and do something with it. Yeah, okay, Cindy, that's right. You are, again, it's just a higher level of that, but it still is a low level altogether, flushing it down the toilet, your energy or your money. Becky, you're asking, you know, you're sending it to the level of that vibration. Yes, it's a bit mental, but it's correct. The thought process is correct. You're sending it back to what you don't want, which is what? Fear, pain, lack, loss. Yes, and if you will, from a vibrational standpoint, that is a lower vibration again. Yes, Julian, that would be the translation. We stay acting from the ego, fears, and survival, you know, and defenses, and yeah, programs. Exactly, the schisms. So how can we then really work with this, guys? I mean, what's your suggestion? What's your suggestion? How can you get out of that, you know, these different layers of well, self-deception, if you will? Now there's a level of once we figured out, you know, how to connect, oh, we think we've got it done, we're done. Yeah. Once we figured out how to, you know, harness our body and all this, you know, and how to make connect, you know, how to have lots of friends, we think we're done. Okay. Once we're starting to realize that there was a much different level of discernment here, yeah, and that all this identity stuff and false stuff and all that was a huge big illusion. Oh, we think we got it, you know, we got it, we understood it. Yeah, we're done. Then we realize, like, oh shit, you know, deeper connection is different. Okay, I can't just, you know, I can't look at life and other people as a hostile, okay, and disconnect myself from it. That's not how this works. We're all connected. And once you figure that out, you know, you hold hands and sing kumbaya and you think you're done. But that's not it either. It's not those moments where, you know, we all celebrate being all one and loving each other and all that. It's not those moments where you need your higher perception. What are those moments? When do we need that? Do we need initiative? When do we need to be awake, guys?
Hi, Jona. We were talking about this the other day as well in one of the group meetings, about feeling when we recognize that, like if I recognize that, oh, I'm at home, I'm alone or whatever, then recognizing, hang on a minute, it's up to me to change that feeling. Like,
Yeah.
what do I want to do? Go out and feel from that space of like whatever is blocking me. As soon as I feel a program, hear a program, and feel how it drops my energy, it's like, wait a minute, that's that sneaky, like me identifying.
But it's not even sneaky. It's just You know, it just is. That's
No,
ego. There's this
it's ego.
gravity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
this is,
it can take us quickly. It can, like for me, it can take me out. I can just drop, but I recognize, I can admit to myself, hang on, my energy's dropped, and flip the thought. But also going like you said, this life is short. It's like, hang on,
yeah,
what do I want to do? What's my love? What drives me? What makes me feel alive? I mean, this weekend,
yes,
I've got a friend coming up. We're doing we're having a acupuncture session meeting. I'm going to meet the local acupuncturist here. It's going to be fun. I'm excited. Like getting out and doing these sort of things, making connections with some people in Brisbane who are flying up. It's going to be fun. So
yeah. These are good examples. That's a good example. Doing something with it. Okay.
yeah, otherwise I'd just be sitting here.
Yeah.
And believe,
That
and
doesn't mean that you automatically asleep, but taking initiative, being inspired, is a lifestyle, guys. Do you understand what I mean? That's a lifestyle. This doesn't mean that you have to do all the time. I can be inspired when I sit here all by myself and just put little glass beads, you know, on my pavers with grout, you know, great stepping stones. But everybody who sees it, who sees me doing it, or who sees the result or whatever, it's like, oh wow, that's so cool. Being inspired is not, you don't have to go out on YouTube and stuff. You know, this is this all has to do with our individual aptitude and talents and all that. Being inspired means to bring your life force into expression at all times. When you cook a meal, when you know, see people, when you you know, interact with animals or plants, yeah, it includes all the other. And yes, we call this awake, but it's more than that. So it's, people think that they're done when they can discern things, when they understand, you know, like spirituality and stuff, that when they know how to meditate. No, that's when it begins. You're not done then. That's when you finally awake. So self-mastery is not about a certain level of accomplishment or a certain, you know, ability. It is your willingness, your clarity, your discernment, your higher thinking and your higher perceiving all together. You manifesting this, you consciously choosing to put this into this world at all times. And even if it's just a smile, or if it's something that, you know, something new that you want to try, an experiment that you're doing. Because sometimes, you know, I just do goofy things. I come to school, or, you know, you don't see me every day, but, you know, I do goofy things. I wear a weird t-shirt or a hat or something like that. Yeah. And it does something to people. I don't need to talk about energies or anything to be inspiring. I don't need to, you know anything about self-mastery to take initiative. Those are very, very practical principles. And when it comes now to these exercises that can allow us to stay in the flow of that, to actually turn this into a lifestyle, yeah, here it requires a little more conscious inventory taking. And you guys implied all this, you mentioned this, you look at these different levels of yourself, you look at what's in, I mean, obviously when you create a worksheet like that, it's all 2D and it looks very mental, but most of you already do this intuitively, yeah. You feel into your needs, you feel into your physical, your emotional, your mental, your spiritual, and your soul or energetic well-being. Yeah, and you identify what the conflict is and where the imbalance is. And then if you want to go a step farther here, you know, you can have some perception checks to go with it. Yeah, is this sustainable? Is this desirable? Is this acceptable? Is this ethical? Is this balanced? Yeah, that's how we want to check or keep ourselves in check. Not as in questioning ourselves, not as in berating or condemning ourselves, but as in like keeping ourselves on our toes. Yeah, so that we can make sure that whatever that balance is that we're seeking, that can be maintained, that it's sustainable. So now we come to the most important part here of this workshop, namely the exercises that we can, you know, with this conscious awareness of why we want self-mastery. Yeah, and what the activities are that are fundamentally leading to that. Yeah, not just as a principle, as a general understanding, but more so as like a daily exercise, if you will. And you know, these 6 exercises that I'm going to go through here with you right now, you know, these are all things that you're already familiar with in one way or another. But it's basically step 24 of the sacred self-healing journey, you know, where you put it all together. Yeah, and what the actual purpose of all these different steps and you know, these different layers of self that you've worked through, you know, why you even did that, what the purpose is. So you can, for example, do this here now, in, you know, as a maybe a weekly basis. Okay, for the next week, you want to just work on one of these exercises to just sort of build this into your daily habits, into your daily routine. And some of you have heard me say this. I've mentioned Course of Miracles, for example, that is aligned to this. Yeah, so Course of Miracles practices that in 365 lessons. It's a daily lesson for every day of the year. But they're basically divided in these 6 clusters. Yeah, so the first 40 are all about gaining control of your thinking, and then it's about, you know, like roughly, it's roughly the same. Yeah, so you can use the Course of Miracles along with this, but I want to explain it to you or lay it all out for you here, what this actually means. So the first part of our journey is always about gaining control of our thinking. Why? Because when it comes to these schisms, when it comes to these problems, when it comes to these choices, when it comes to awakeness and all these other things that we've talked about already, and you guys know this, the conflicts arise in our mind, don't they? I mean, yes, we can have some physical issues, we can have some emotional issues with it, but it's that body mind, right, that I talk about so often, you know, where the body and the nervous system, the neurotransmitters and the emotions and the way we interpret it is all connected. Julian, you called this reactivity earlier, yeah, where you just experience yourself reacting to something and you can't really stop it because it's your nervous system, yeah, that does that. So the exercise that goes with gaining control of your thinking is something that weaves through all and everything that I do, is basically to gain objectivity, yeah, and to gain more conscious thinking, to ask, to inquire Yeah, to really work with your thinkingness. So a person who is asleep is not aware of what they're thinking. They're just reacting to it. So the exercise for that is to, like the Course of Miracles does that in the first 40 lessons, is to focus on something very mundane. You can take anything, any item that you see in front of yourself right now. Ideally something that you can hold in your hands. I have a little nail clippers here in front of me, so I hold this in my hand, and you know, you really focus on what is going on here in your body mind. Can you guys all follow me? As an exercise, you focus on something mundane, a mundane item, and you focus on just for 5 minutes a day on being with that item, okay? Being in the presence of this item and observing the sequence of your thoughts, your sensations, and your emotions. That's something that we practice in the energy course. So you hold this, I'm holding a nail clipper right now, and I like closing my eyes and you know, sort of focusing on my breathing for a moment. And then I feel into like, what does this, what are my 5 senses reporting back to me? What does this feel like? The English language, unfortunately, brings sensing and feeling, or you know, confuses that a bit. So how does this feel like in my hand? What are the thoughts that are going through my head? What are the emotions? So the thoughts that are going through my head are like, this is the best nail clipper that I have. And I bought this way back in Germany. And the emotions that I have are, I love this one. This is, I'm attached to it. That's why I always have it close to me, because I don't know if you have the same experience, but nail clippers and little tools like that, they often get lost, especially if you are, if you live with other people. And you do this for 5 minutes every day, and you'll find out that there are some very interesting things that are going on in your head. You'll be able to observe your automatic thinking. And in that moment where you are exercising your conscious willingness, your conscious will to focus your thinking and your sensing and your perceiving on the item that you have, you are sending an extremely important message to your higher self. It gives you more power, because your higher self is now like, oh my God, she's actually awake. And the positive side effect of this exercise is that you actually gain more control and function of the world of your senses. Yeah, and this automatic sort of judging and, you know, the emotional attachment that you have. The second exercise, gaining control of your will, yeah, is obviously the next level to this. This is also related to the reactivity, but on a different level, namely the level of choice making. Here, you want to exercise or practice giving yourself simple commands. You want to be in touch. You want to be very clear about what it is that you're doing. Again, 5 minutes a day, you know, right now I'm going to the bathroom. Right now I'm filling up a glass of water. Right now I'm making myself a sandwich. Right now, you know, this kind of exercise where you are calibrating what you're doing, what you're thinking, and how you feel about this. A simple command. I'm doing this right now, or do this right now. Again, it increases your determination. It practices a certain neural pathway Namely, it allows you to gain more control of your will, of the will itself. You're witnessing yourself seeing, or you witness yourself setting your will into motion. It's extremely important for people who want to learn how to let go of unhealthy habits and addictions. This exercise. Yes, go ahead.
So yeah, what I was the question that came up, which is not a very important question, but does this tie into I'm not talking about like a to-do list that, every single day you write and stuff like that, but mental promises, I guess, is the best word that what one might make for themselves. Today I'm going to make a soup and I'm going to mop the floor. And then getting to the end of the day and go, oh, I didn't do that and that.
Right.
But
This is
trying
like
to stick to those things. It's like
it's the typical success coaching, right? And this is exactly why it doesn't work. Because it goes too far in the future. People haven't mastered the level of now yet. Okay? So that's why the exercise only refers to what you're doing right now. Do you see the difference? When you make a to-do list, or when you do a like sort of a projected, I want to accomplish this and this and this and this today, you're not giving yourself commands. You are having hopes and expectations about what you might be doing. And in essence, that increases the confliction again, because a lot of times things happen, right? I mean, how far in advance can you plan? This leads to the next exercise, because yes, we're going to have to somehow balance that within ourselves. We need to gain control of all the expressions. Yeah, and expressions are, of our feelings. Yeah, discernment is what it leads to, what it increases our discernment. Yeah, not only, learning to discern between emotions and feelings, but also between, whether this is even in balance with your needs right now. Look, if I have a to-do list that says, oh, I need to do this and da 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 da, and then by 12 p.m., by noon, I feel so tired that I get all these other signals that say, it's probably better to meditate or to take a nap or something. And what are you going to do now with your to-do list? You run into a conflict. So self-mastery really has to do with decreasing conflicts. And the way you do this with this exercise, yeah, gaining control of the expressions of your feelings, is that you don't go into resistance with anything. Yeah, it's basically non-resistance. Number 3. You differentiate how the emotion that something is triggered in you, and the way you want to express it, or the way you want to deal with it. Yeah, so you allow your conflict, for example, and at noon, where you wanted to do this and that, which again here is not the same as gaining control of your will, because that is only in the moment. Okay, but you had a to-do list because you've read somewhere that it's good to have a to-do list. But as you're doing that, you're also increasing. That's, by the way, why the book The Secret is complete bullshit and sends people to the wrong direction. It increases their inner confliction, yeah, and with it self-sabotage and condemnation and so forth. So what you do instead is that you stay present with your emotions and conflictions, regardless of whether you like them or not. And that you work on increasing your self-mastery by letting go of the attachment or the resistance that you have to it. Which means, let's say I'm tired and now I need to make a choice, right? Am I going to do the stuff that's on my to-do list so that I can feel proud of myself? Or and I'm going to heed my inner signals now and change my plan, yeah, and say to myself, okay, there's a limitation that I have bumped against. Yeah, my body isn't really able to do the things that I want to do. Yeah, so I get a little bit of a negative feeling here, disappointment maybe, or something like that, frustration. So I'm not going to resist that. I'm going to stay with that now, and I'm going to do what I can do to balance myself. Here you can begin to consciously watch your own expressions in action. You engage with what it is that you are reacting to and make a conscious decision of how you want to express that. So you increase the mastery of your expression through your discernment. Exercise number 4 is then something that many of you already do. Yeah, you work with the mindset and the framework around this. So you find ways to see it in a positive way, to see the glass as half full rather than half empty. Yeah, and you remember your own principles in that. Yeah, you shift your perspective. You say to yourself, okay, I can look at this as, me not, breaking the promise to it myself because I didn't do all the stuff that I had on my to-do list. But maybe it was just, unrealistic expectations. Maybe I have to work on becoming better, in judging what I can expect from myself. Yeah, so I'm seeing this as a positive learning experience. It's at the level on which a lot of these invocations and energy alignments are on. Yeah, to actually consciously shift your perspective and see every experience as a gain, as growth. This often means that we have to be willing, or actually, in my experience, always means that we have to have the willingness to sit with an uncomfortable feeling, the feeling of a broken promise. You guys know what that feels like, right? It feels disappointing, frustrating. Yeah. So you need to sit with this, and here's where, this whole cluster of empathy and sympathy and so forth comes in, because it's easy to go into the emotion of that frustration, yeah, or that would be the lower expression, or you pick the higher expression, which is empathy, yeah, where you say to yourself, yeah, maybe I had too much expectations, or maybe I'm, there's still too much sort of perfectionism, and what's behind my perfectionism? Oh, the fear of making mistakes. Oh, what's behind the fear of making mistakes? Oh, it's the fear of rejection. That's why it's on the level of higher thinking. If you investigate what causes the confliction in you, yeah, and through a loving attention and presence toward it, you allow yourself to shift your attitude about it. This is a really, really important step to decrease absorption and projection, yeah, and helps you to strengthen your perception, because most of you have barriers of perception because you have too much of this overlay, this mental overlay. Yeah, that's why it's called higher thinking, and that's why a lot of these courses that I have that sort of headline or subline, training higher thinking, because that's what most of us lack. Just because you're energetically sensitive or you're empathic doesn't mean that you're capable of higher thinking. Yeah, it just means that you have more sensory input. Yeah, and that in actuality, you need to learn how to discern even more. So for you, these exercises are even more important, not just to climb up some kind of imaginary ladder, ascension to enlightenment or so. No. To be able to master your own sensory input, your own the thinkingness and emotionality, yeah, and to discern this. Because I mean, let me see your hands here, guys. How many of you experience yourself in this constant schism between these higher vibratory goals that you have and your intellectual understanding of that, but then seeing yourself in 3D reality acting against it? How many of you? Raise your hand. Mine is up as well. That's pretty much almost all of us. And why is
Jona,
that?
you know what? When I looked at this stuff, I was just like, you know, what popped up for me, and you know, like, of course, this is your lessons. That being so challenging on a very finite level, because I think that one, especially since it has to do with mind and thinking, is a lot in relation to the outside world. And there seems to be so much false positivity, false truth, and
Yeah, but
all of these
no,
things at that
that's
level.
other people's choices. That's other people's choices. You can
But my
choose.
issue with it is that I find myself not being. I'm just like, that all looks false. I'll be as positive I can and just feel the feeling, I guess.
Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, there's multiple truth talks that that I've done about false positivity. Okay, this is just another, you know, sub exercise of this one. It can't obviously be false positivity. What is false positivity? That's a delusion. It's where we deceive ourselves. You have to make that a conscious choice to see the truth, to see the good and the beautiful in this world, even when it gets ugly. So the problem that we all have, and what's in the way here of this level of awareness and self-mastery, is our ego. We don't want to feel negative feelings. That's ego. You don't want to be disappointed because you trusted in somebody. But that's growth right there. Then you go in and you use your higher awareness to realize what went wrong here. You sit with it. Why was I so positive, even though, you know, this person clearly isn't trustworthy, say? You know, take toxic relationships. Why do we have these experiences? This is not because we're a victim and the world is so bad and, you know, our job is to be positive and run through the world and be misused. No, that's a negative thinking. Positive thinking is, oh, you know, that's interesting that I get attracted to people that are not trustworthy. Oh, that's interesting. I have not, you know, relationships with narcissists. I wonder why. Is it maybe that I'm lazy, that I'm not actually checking if I can trust people? Is it that I got myself carried away because of the sensual or the hopes and dreams and so forth that got triggered in me? You're not a victim of other people's negativity. If anything, we are victims of our own self-deception, namely telling ourselves, oh no, this person is all different. This, no, no. It's our own ego that does that. When it comes to like trying to avoid negative feelings, our ego gives us a framework that is completely unconscious. It's externalized. It says, oh, I just had a bad experience with a person, and that's that person's fault. And I don't like this. We have the choice to like or dislike experiences, obviously, but if we never really work with it, we will not be able to break through that. Because we're forgetting to ask ourselves, oh, wait. You know, what did I miss here? What were my hopes and dreams? What was my delusion here? What did I want so badly that I was perhaps violating my own boundaries or letting myself get pushed, which is also a violation of boundaries, but I wasn't aware of it. So yeah, I'm not saying that we're all, responsible for, the perpetrators out there. No, but why is our system not informing us that this is not a trustworthy person? Because we don't want to hear it. That's why. False positivity is to say, oh, no. I'm not listening to my inner guidance. I'm listening to, my ego that says, yeah. And that's, by the way, a question that I've received 2 questions for this webinar. One had to do with how do I know that something is coming from my higher self and not from my ego self? That is a typical question that we more or less always discuss. Yeah, and one of the ways you can tell is when your ego sort of gets all excited and gets, sort of tries to milk the juice of something. It's a red flag right there. You should immediately take a step back and say, what's going on here? Yeah, is this actually based on truth, or is this based on something that I want so bad or need so bad that I am willing to let everything else go? What about seeing the truth and the good and the beauty in me? What about feeling self-worth? Did I maybe choose something because I felt inferior, or because I felt unworthy, or because I thought I couldn't, hold the guy, or, whatever? This is the true motivation, guys. Higher thinking informs you about your true motivation, and it's not fun. It's a conscious choice to stay with the uncomfortable feeling and emotion, and ask yourself, what's underneath here? And the higher thinking that you develop in such way then allows you to state that in front of yourself and say, yeah, I can see why I chose that, because I have such a strong desire, to connect, to have that kind of this feeling of belonging and all that, to a point where I am willing to let all my other principles of my own integrity go. Yes, it has to do with admitting things to ourselves. You cannot step into higher thinking and manifest that if you allow yourself to think in terms of externalizations. It's not possible, Janet, or anybody here. Yeah, so every single time you hear yourself, think or act in ways that energize somebody else's fault, yeah, like blame and stuff like that, you're externalizing, and you are sending the opposite message of the one that you want to send, namely that you're not in control. You like, basically degrading your own higher self in that moment, because you're saying, oh no, my ego stuff is more important to me. I don't know if this is coming across clearly, but the really what it should sound like, and if you listen to my energy updates in the last weeks, I've mentioned or I've talked a lot about this, to choose that regardless, to choose that which you stay for, your virtues, regardless, with the emphasis on regardless. So the point isn't to find, culprits. The point is to understand why you're choosing something. And that opens up the world of projection to us, because then we realize how much we project. Yeah, and it strengthens our perception then as a consequence. And this is then exercise number 5, to stay open-minded and to practice neutrality at all cost with everything. Yeah, and in this way, to increase our receptivity. There's things that in the energy healer trainings, I teach that in the energy course, I teach that you start changing your language as well, as opposed to, oh, it's this or it's that or it's that. You say it appears as, or it seems like, or it feels like. Yeah, that you remain open to all possibilities, that you stop giving so much weight to your lower perceptions, and that you already imply that the way you interpret it may not be the way it is. Yeah, and so you keep yourself open for that and practice non-judgment. Only so can you actually jump this ego barrier, namely in manifestation, the problem that you can't really manifest anything that your ego cannot imagine. That's a recursive problem. And the way we try to compensate for that is with fantasy. And fantasy is not something that is aligned to our energy. So it creates all kinds of conflicts, like disappointment, and again, energizes externalizing. So ultimately, the 6th exercise, and that's done when it becomes a lifestyle, is that you harmonize all of them. And that then increases your capacity for trust, for love, for truth, for freedom, conscious creation, conscious perceiving. Because you're in truth with yourself and your higher consciousness. That is how we learn to manifest, if you will. Yeah, manifest is nothing but bringing things into our physical life here, into our 3D life. Yeah, through self-mastery, gaining control of our thinking, gaining control of our will, which includes our emotions, gaining control of the expressions of our feelings, making higher vibratory choices, namely seeking positivity, truth, good, and the beauty in every situation. Yeah, accepting everything as a learning experience, and staying open-minded, recognizing the limitations of one's own perception, one's own ego mind, and practicing neutrality. And we can balance all that. Now, this is very scholarly in the way that I'm presenting this here, but this is based on a lot of I don't know, the best authors and most humanistic authors of what our humanity brought forward. Yeah, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, Goethe, Steiner. Okay, this is where they all agree that that's how you train your consciousness and gain self-mastery. So with that, I would like to close. Here is something that I give to people who do the high transformation, the energy boost with me. This is something that you can understand just by looking at it. And that's basically just putting all these different witnessing and observations into context with another here for 14 days. Yeah, you can use such a transformation protocol for each of the exercises. You can determine how long you want to do them. I want to do exercise number 1 for 1 week or for 1 month, and then write things down. Yeah, report them back to yourself. This also helps you to increase your self mastery. Yeah, because there's a feedback loop that needs to be there, and if you don't energize that feedback loop, if you go against it, yeah, and if you energize the conflicts, the schism, the disconnect with yourself, with your thoughts, with your emotions, your sensations, your feelings, and your thoughts, okay, then you'll always find yourself in that conflict, yeah, and waste your energy, waste your life force. Any questions, any burning questions here, guys? Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, one more time, I keep pestering you. If you want to take initiative, guys, if you want to really step into this, I know many of you have money issues right now, but this is an investment, okay, to really step into this inspired place with yourself, yeah, and to experience this in 3D. And they're fundamentally using this as a framework for these 5 days. Yeah, it's 5 days, 4 nights, pretty much 24/7, to introduce these exercises and other practical exercises that can go with that on the different levels, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and energetic, to the participants, and actually do it all the way to cooking together and all the way to like really expressing all these things in 3D so that we can experience ourselves doing it. As always, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so much for those of you who shared. And yes, I'm excited too, Cindy. Yes, it's getting closer and closer now. So you guys have a wonderful June. And stay tuned with the energy updates, because these are all themes and topics here that come up with these collective energies. Yeah, that's sort of just me applying my higher perception and seeing the bigger picture. Love you guys. Bye-bye.